Hi, we'll start in about 5 minutes, right? Good afternoon. My name is Bolton Fernando. It's my honor today to introduce Mr. Chris Chiancone. He is the CIO and CISO for the city of Plano. Been with the city since 2016. Big Cleveland Browns fan from the dog pound. Went to UNLV.
Yeah, we're recruiting, if any fans, if they'd like to come up after.
So, one of the skill sets that kind of got my attention is he's an extrovert. Not a lot of the IT or information security folks are extroverts. We tend to hide behind the phone and the laptop screen. And especially when you go to conferences, hold on to your horses because they're behind pillars looking at their email. So really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on how you get out and speak about technology and information security. Recent things that he has done is worked on these hyper-converged infrastructure, Newtonics. He's a change agent with very good people skills. And last but not the least, his department just won the 5th best IT organization from Digital Cities. He has been nominated for National CIO of the Year by Orbi, and has a passion in making the perception of impossible possible. So with that, I will hand the microphone over to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and one more thing, if you have questions, please use the Slido program. Just go into slido.com, put in NCSAM, and let the questions pop up, and you can upvote them, and based on the numbers, there are folks who are with the microphones, they will help you out on this. Thank you.
So as you can imagine, or probably pick up by now, is I'm not an introvert, I'm an extrovert. So I'm going to move around quite a bit. When I was asked to do this presentation today, I wanted to do something that was going to keep you engaged, bring a little bit of security into it, but I also bring a big problem that's coming into our industry, or is even being, it's getting even more difficult in our industry, and we'll go through that in a minute. So we could have talked about a number of things today. We could have talked about, I keep getting strangers calling me. We could talk about getting emails that I haven't done business with. We could talk about, I clicked on this link, and we've never heard that before, right? We keep on getting emails, all my files are locked up and they're asking for a bit something. This is in the news quite a bit. Why do I have to click on a link and connect from a hotel for the VPN folks that are out there? Why do I need to change my password? And one of my all-time favorites, my next door neighbor said that we could do, that's always the most fun to try to combat. So does it matter if we have data from other countries in our databases? So there's a lot of those kind of things that we could talk about. We could talk about things that are going on. Just in October alone, GDPR, state-sponsored attack, phone spoofing, and IoT are things that have been talked about to exhaustion. The two big ones out there, most Americans failed their cybersecurity quiz, and the other one is that there's a movement that the information security industry in itself is broken. So I read an article on LinkedIn on the way in today where the federal government stated, and I think I put it on my LinkedIn if you get a chance to take a look at it after, that they're going to be holding their contractors at a higher level of security, and they're going to be requiring more secure ways of them doing business with the organization. So after doing a little bit of thinking, reaching out and doing some research and trying to customize this for this distinguished audience today of SMEs and contractors, business partners, and leaders in management, I think one of the things that I've noticed in the industry during research is one of the biggest challenges that we have is communication. And I'm going to show how it ties directly to security and security awareness. So, in my opinion, communication is single-handedly one of our biggest challenges. So let me set the stage for you for a moment for those in my audience that are logical processors. Those people that want that logical information as we go through this. In 2018, there was nearly 17 million identity thefts. So keep that number in your mind, 17 million. It's up from 8% from 2017 out of 235 million online consumers in the United States. So what's that equate to? Well, that equates to the state of Ohio, the state of West Virginia, and the state of Kentucky combined. That's how many people in 2018 were victims of identity theft. 9% of them fell to identity fraud. That is the entire state of Florida. So about 1/6 of the whole country in 2018 got compromised of one way or another with identity threats online. It took about 15 hours per person to actually remedy, if possible, each and every one of their identity problems. That would equate to about 29,000 years if you took the 17 million people that got compromised. It's up 200%, right, from year to year. But what we need to watch, and I'll bring this into in a minute, is the volume and the velocity is getting faster and faster. So 5.1 billion in losses is what that equated to. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what is 5.1 billion? So 5.1 billion is 25,500 $200,000 houses. 5.1 billion is 204,000 times around this beautiful globe. The number is big. Then, and what could be done with that 5.1 billion to help people get into affordable housing, but yet we're using that money to try to pay off identity issues. So remember that 17 million, okay? The fraud and consumer identity complaints from the Federal Trade Commission, these are the numbers year after year. As you can see, they're about equally spaced out across the board. Remember, there was nearly 17 million Americans felt identity theft. Look how many people actually reported it. 2, 3, maybe 3.5%. Why? Well, I don't think it's a lack of understanding, and I don't think it's ignorance, and I don't know if it's a lack of motivation, because anybody that's been in this situation knows that it's a very difficult situation to be in. Well, the research shows that identity theft continues to happen for a couple different reasons. Number one, ignorance. 91% of people believe that they're at risk, but 60% of them won't change their passwords. Crossover. 47% of people use the same password at home as they do at work. 53% of people do not change their password after a large news outbreak. Do you remember some of these companies? Marriott, 500 million. Facebook, 29 million. Google and T-Mobile. Let's not even ignore the fact that right now, local municipalities are under attack. If you could read the paper, and if you've seen the news lately, last month there was 15 agencies, including 2 Air Force bases, that got hit by ransomware. City of Carrollton was knocked back to the Stone Age, and they're trying desperately to try to undo this. They're getting hit with a variety of malware, time bombs. They're getting hit with a variety of different types of ransomware. It's never stopping, and it's either coming from their customers or it's coming from the people that are internal into the organization. Storage. 40% of people still store their passwords on phone or paper. Now, I don't know if anybody in here does that, and don't raise your hand, please, but if you know somebody that does, or puts it under their keyboard, things of that sort, that's a huge security risk. But it still happens in 2019, regardless of all the different information that's out there. As my wife would argue, I'm probably a type A personality person. Part of it is that 80% of type A personalities, all right, feel like they need to own their password. It's got to be theirs. So the strong password information doesn't work, and yet we don't trust biometrics, and by the way, we don't want to use cards, right? And that makes it complex. And the biggest, I think, threat is immunity. 51% believe that there's no way a hacker could guess their password. How many people in here are actually security experts? Right? You know that's wrong, right? There is open source software out there right now that I could probably crack the majority of passwords within a day, right? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to pick a team that was not gonna compete with the Browns to go to the Super Bowl as an example, okay? So I picked the Dallas Cowboys here. You'd laugh, but for smaller organizations in Texas, Dallas Cowboys and the Rangers are the 2 most prevalent passwords they use, especially if they don't change their passwords regularly. When I say small businesses, I'm talking law offices, dentists, doctors, right? Small manufacturing companies, people that you might do business with, people that have those little slide things that when they sell your blueberry muffin to you in the morning. That's what I'm talking about. Now, in 1982, because I'm using a capital Cowboys, right, it would take approximately 3 years to crack that word. That's if I'm not using a dictionary attack. If a word is in any dictionary, in any language that you use, I gotcha. True? 1992, it takes 6 months. Going down to today, about 18 hours, down to about 1 hour in 2022. But with advancements in quantum computing and artificial intelligence, that will probably take seconds. There is a product out there that's been out there for years that automatically creates every secret value, they're called hashes, and its equivalent password. So if they could get your hash, they automatically know what your password is in the database. So that's why it's important to use strong passwords in your organization. It's not that your security people are sitting there going, hey, we want to make your life miserable. It's truly something that's really important. So why do we have all these issues? Well, there was a study in 2018 from the psychology of passwords, around the psychology of passwords. And they determined that fear was the #1 most prevalent reason why people don't manage their passwords more effectively. The fear of forgetting it. People get embarrassed to call the help desk. The fear of loss of control. If I have to do a hardened password, then I can no longer use the password I've been using for the last 15 years of Cowboys. Embarrassment. People get embarrassed, especially if it happens twice or 3 times. They might be having a bad week, bad day. Losing of peg word reminders. So some people say, hey, look, I'm going to use my anniversary month and year, let's say. But then you have to keep on adding a 1 to it, or a 2 to it, or a 3 to it to make it unique. They start losing that after a while, and then they end up locking themselves out, and then they end up forgetting it and everything else down the line. And then a lack of productivity. Because changing passwords could be considered a lack of productivity. Why do I always have to change these passwords, and why do I have to log into 75 systems at the same time? Now, I don't know if you guys use Okta here or some sort of single sign-on. That makes your life so much easier. But a lot of organizations aren't that fortunate. So in many cases, at the city of Plano, I have 350 enterprise class applications I manage. There is 50 divisions. So across that, as you can imagine, you have to remember a whole lot of passwords if you don't have some type of a single sign-in environment. And then general mistrust, spying, and Big Brother. Because of course, if we could reset your password, we must be able to see what your old password was. And we don't do that as well. So why all the fear? Well, most of us in this room are technologists, I would say. I was asking, right? I hate to say, but we created it. We used an old marketing term that happened way back in the late 80s, early 90s. We commuted it with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Does anybody know what the term is that we use? Y2K. FUD, right? We use FUD. Part of the reason is that I think technologists in the late 80s and 90s didn't have the social skills to be able to communicate. And this is the way that they were able to use a hammer when they should have used, a saw maybe, on how to actually get this across to people. But since the beginning of time, we've been trying to figure out how do we communicate better, right? We started with hieroglyphics, right? And then I got in trouble with my wife because I asked her how long the carrier pigeons took to get back and forth. She didn't like that very much. Runners, we had newspapers, right? And now we go through. But I want you to pay special attention to something right over there. the volume and velocity are increasing. So is it the communication is giving us a hard time, or is it the volume of communication giving us a difficult time as well? Because I don't know about you, but some of the challenges I've run into my career, it's the same thing. We need to communicate better. Well, we put it in posters, we put it in documents, we put it in emails, we talk about it in meetings, and yet we still need to somehow communicate better. So we've evolved into trying to use abbreviations to make communication more effectively across the board, right? We use triangles and formulas and box charts and maps. But I think we need to understand that communication is individualistic, that was a hard word to say, and unique. Today, the typical security presence, all right, is single-channeled. Now, talking to your security people a little bit, I think you guys do a remarkable job here, because just the mere fact that they put an event on like this and give you material and encourage you to do this is huge, because a lot of companies don't get that level of support, okay? They get a 1-hour video that you have to watch, take a test, sign your policies, and go back to work. Definitely impressive. So here's some of the posters that I saw out there. We've all seen something like this. My favorite are passwords are like underwear, right? Other people prefer different. But is this working? It doesn't, right? Why doesn't it work, right? Because people learn differently. People are visual. This is going to be one of our biggest challenges in this next generation of employees. Think about this. My wife and I and our 4 kids sit in front of the TV watching TV. My wife and I are watching TV. What are the other 4 kids doing? Watching YouTube on their phones, right? They like to learn in small 1 to 3 minute spurts, right? This is going to be an important communication method as we move forward with this next generation that's coming out of college here right now and probably in the next few years. Some people are oral, right? So podcasts are starting to make a huge comeback again. Let them listen. Find things that actually relate to what you want to do and let them listen, or better yet, create your own. Vlogs, that is something that's getting very popular right now. Gary Vee, any Gary Vee fans in here? Cool guy, huh? He is actually one of, if I remember correctly, his vlog series gains more viewers than the Super Bowl, the World Series, and a UCF fight combined in any one time. Physical. Some people are physical learners, right? Some people are tactile. They like to touch things. Give them something to touch. If you want to show them encryption, give them a box and a lock and a key. They'll put those concepts together in their brain. Logical processors. People that need the data. And I have a surprise for you at the end, for those people in the room that are logical people. Then there's some people that are social, right? We could tell the social people in here and the people that are sitting together, and then the people that sit all by themselves, right? And the people who sit all by themselves are probably my more solitary people. Let them listen to a portal. I myself are a combination of visual, physical, logical, and solitary. I do my best learning using Udemy. I could go back if I don't understand a concept, and I do it at my own pace. So let's talk a little bit about technologists. So if you understand what we're doing here, we started out with security a little bit, and then we're talking about the way security people need to talk to people a little bit more. And then we talked about the different channels that they might need to use to talk a little bit more. But let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of the technologist, because we need to understand our audience. So in the 1990s, our technologists were staffs that had these big disks and printed out all these big things of paper. Right? I started on a A11, had these huge wheels. I thought it was cool because I would go through boxes and boxes of paper. And then you would get it to them. What would they do? They would go through, they would highlight something and throw the whole thing away, right? But that was IT back then. And people were starting to realize that come to 2000, this staff were the people that talked in abbreviations. They were seldom recognized, and sometimes IT was a holding area for people just to go and retire, to leave. It was once seen as a caboose, right? We're far away from that now. We'll talk about that in a minute. Darn it, I keep hitting the wrong button. 2010, they were the staff that could do Excel, run reports, get insights from data. Security was emerging as a real thing, not just an insurance policy. And that's when FUD really started to come out. And then in 2019, technology is now considered the engine rather than the caboose, right? We use descriptors of the modern technologists as collaborators, right? Disruptors, innovators, and convergers. I think this is where the problem starts to happen right here. So let's talk about these staff members that we kept isolated, right? Fed food to under the door so they didn't talk to our customers, right? Had all kinds of different names for them. Nerds, geeks, techies, right? And then all of a sudden, we expected them overnight to be able to communicate and speak and to be able to collaborate and do analysts and be a business partner. Overnight, they didn't have the skills, the social skills, or the training to do that. They were technologists. So what do we need? How do we take these geniuses, right? They have high levels of intelligence and get them to talk in basic terms to our customers without frustrating them, without angering them, and without insulting them. A lot of us in this room as technologists have tried different methods to talk to our customers. And it seems like every time we try something different, it still doesn't work. So how? How do we fix this? Well, I've been using a model for some time that keep it simple, break down complex words, right? The KISS principle. The second thing is, or one thing I do with my staff is show them, don't tell them. It's better to draw it out on a napkin, show them what it's going to look like to try to explain it to them. Make it relevant to the audience. They'll be able to remember it a lot longer. Make it realistic. Compare things to real world issues, right? Without using FUD, right? Because we could say, if you do this, then this is going to happen, or if you do this, this is going to happen. That's still putting fear in them. This top one, in my experience, is the most important, but the most frustrating for IT, and that is something called inculcation. Most technologists do not like to repeat themselves, especially 2, 3, 4 times. But they need to understand that the adult learner learns in cycles. And there might be a period of 2 or 3 weeks and hundreds of activities that our customer has done since the last meeting. So this is the model that I typically use with my technologists over my career to actually get them to help them work with customers more effectively. and building rapport. So rapport is not a question. Questions are tools. Building rapport is building relationships with people, right, on commonality, right? And it is definitely not words. Only 7% of what we say is actually communicated, right? People only pick up 7% of what we say. If I were to sit behind here, for those people that are yawning and bored, if I fell, you guys would all have been excited. But if I sat here and talked in a monotone for hours, you're going to pick up nothing, right? The fact of movement and the fact of talking and the fact of engaging and trying to tease the audience a little bit and talk with individuals in here, that's how I build rapport with you. The further you are back, the harder it is for me to build rapport. The closer you are, the easier it is for me to build rapport. So what does work? Well, it's a topic called mirroring. So it's a physical thing where we model people, right? In a room, try to get the gist of what the room is doing and model them. So somebody has got a smile on their face and they're talking, right? Try to talk with a smile on your face. Someone's got their hand on their chin and they're mumbling. Try to, maybe with the other hand, go, I see what you got to say, right? But try, it's hard because they don't understand why they have to be there. See, the typical customer doesn't understand that it's cheaper to move a window when you're architecting the house than after the house is built, right? So they don't understand why technologists ask so many questions up front. It's so that we don't have to move that window when we're done with that process. So, all right. So how do we teach these soft skills? Well, you could ask the guys in the back right now. They keep on adjusting the volume of my mic because of what my weakness is volume. I talk loud. I'm a loud person, right? I told Ryan number 1 back there, I talk a lot and I'm loud. He's over there probably doing, oh my goodness, I don't know how to keep track of this guy. The speed of what we say is so important because if you talk too fast, people take you as being a salesperson or gregarious. You talk too slow, they take it as you're talking down to them. So it's a skill that you have to learn when you talk with your customers. Tone. Every one of us in this room has gotten ourselves in trouble with tone. Why? We bite our tongue and we try to explain it in a slow fashion, but we talk in such a way, why can't you understand what I'm saying, right? That's something that needs to be watched. Terms. Drop the geek speak. Nobody cares. You don't go to your doctor and he says, okay, your mitochondria is not producing enough ATP, so your cellular function is not working at the, Yeah. You go to the doctor, he gives you an antibiotic, you feel better and leave. Drop the geek speak. One thing that I've used, and I'll bring this up here in a minute, that works is I call it the candy jar. So boss I used to work with had a candy jar in his office, and I used to take the candy and put it on the table, and I would explain things to him with candy. It could have been packets. It could have been virtualization, which is really, really tough to teach with candy. Hyperconverged is ridiculously hard to explain, right? But once they get the concept, they get where you're going with it, they move on, and they have a better idea of how you, at least when you ask for something, they know why. And then control the gestures. I said before that only 7% of what we say in words is important. So this is a picture of me from college. No, I'm just kidding, it's not me. I wish. So, picture of me from college, right? So we show our teeth. That's a smile, right? Well, another animal could show their teeth. Gives you a completely different perception, doesn't it? Even different perception. But let me tell you something. Research that I did for this tells us that gorillas have one natural predator, and it's man. Do you know why? Because when we smile, we show our teeth for affection. When any other animal and animal species smile, they show their teeth as aggression. Not except for that case. And then the final one is the crocodile, who's always showing their teeth, but I'm just kidding. They can't do anything about it. So how important are gestures? Well, I could take pictures of each person in this audience, run it through, let's say, AWS, and be able to pick out how you felt about what we were talking about at different times during this, which we're not doing. I could also, but people are predictable. My degree is in industrial and organizational psychology. And I had the opportunity, I went to UNLV. Yes, I went to Las Vegas and graduated. That's the biggest accomplishment there is. I did it through the casino management school, a lot of these classes. So I had the opportunity to learn from a man by the name of Dr. Hergenhan. And Dr. Hergenhan stated that there was only 40 personality types in the world. 40 personality types. I didn't believe it, right? As the older you get, the more you see, oh, that's like so-and-so, or that's like so-and-so. You can see that people have personality types that are similar, but facial expressions are even more similar than that. I'm sure that none of us have ever went into a meeting with a face like this to our customer, or this to our customers, or this to our customers, or the all-damaging, I don't care, I'm done dealing with you, I'm smiling and talking, but I'm done with this conversation. This is what our customers are seeing. This is what they're feeling. You could be saying all day long, you're such a nice person, and you could say it all day long, right? If I say, hey, you look like a nice guy. A whole different body language. If I say, hey man, you look like a nice guy. Completely different body language, different message, same words, right? I don't know if you're a nice guy or not, so anybody in the audience, if you know him, just let me know. But this is not all on us. The organization has a responsibility too, to learn how to bidirectionally communicate with us, right? So the problem is that how do we give all this information to technologists, get that brain moving, and get them that carriage that they're asking for without it turning into a car? Because if we leave it to the technologist without a lot of good information, that car is going to turn into a rocket ship. Then that rocket ship's going to go to Mars, right? So basically, I call this the Elon Musk principle, right? It just keeps on going and going and going and going and going until there's no end. So how does a technologist think, okay? I had the opportunity to write a couple articles this year for the American Military University. And one of them was a guide for public safety leaders on communicating with technologists. So in there, we put up there, what is a technologist? Well, they genuinely care, okay? They're good people in general. They're more introverted in nature, right, typically. They are incredibly smart and have very complex social skills. They push the edge, okay? Most technologists are very edgy, right? They hate paper and bureaucracy, right? Give me paper and you're gonna drive me crazy, I'm not gonna do this anymore. And then they're not fortune tellers. A lot of times our customers think that we just could figure out what that is that they want to do and put on the screen and how it's gonna work. That makes it very difficult. So how do we teach the enterprise how to work with the tech staff? Well, some basics. Try to understand that you're not their only customer, right? See, I think statistically it is nationally, one IT person per 100 people, okay? So I don't know what it is here, but that's roughly where we're at the city. We're a little less than that. But that one person doesn't have 5 or 6 different skill sets, right? So from the customer's perspective, they're working with IT and they're the only customer. So getting them to understand that you're not the only one helps out quite a bit, or that it definitely helps out quite a bit. Explain your needs and your wants, right? Explain what you need. They'll figure out your want. Troubleshooting takes time. Don't hover over them. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where your customers are hovering over you, but it takes time. Push their boundaries. Technologists love technology. Let them know what you like. And then the most important, if they put on training, send your people to it. Because the majority, statistically, of problems with any new application is that it comes from people that didn't go to the training. So let's recap a little bit. Communication is one of our industry's biggest challenges. Fear is one of our largest obstacles. Yeah, I have a TV back there. I didn't memorize it. We need to train our customers differently. We need to spend time building better relationships, train our customers differently, and building rapport. We need to watch our body language, avoid drastic facial expressions. And we need to communicate more effectively. So let's recap a minute. In this presentation, what I did was, I was audio, or I was video, right? I'm being videotaped, you guys could see me physically. You listened to me auditorily. I was physical, I bounced around a lot and interacted with the audience. I haven't gotten to the logical processing part, but you're coming next. Social, right? It's a social setting. And for those who are more solitary people in here, you probably didn't like this thing in the first place because you had to come to it, right? So, for my logical processors out there, I put a whole credit in there of all the stuff I talked about for you people that want to go back and try to say, is what he's saying true? I also gave credit to the Cleveland Browns and the Dallas Cowboys and Fox, NFL, HBO, everything across the board. So anything that I might have used through this whole presentation, right? So what I'd like to do then is open it up for some questions and some dialogue with one another. But my name is Chiancone. I put the little thing down at the bottom because I know it's a good Italian name that's hard for people to pronounce. I am a CISSP. I've been one for about going on 15, 16 years now. So I do have quite a bit of security stuff. What I wanted to do is put something together that kept you engaged a little bit more. Yeah, that's a picture of me if you're wondering. I wanted to try to keep it engaged and make it different. I have sat through so many presentations that, you know, you fall asleep, you get bored at, right? I constantly am trying to get that message out there. I do love technology. I never have to go to work, and I like people to have that same experience. So with that, I'd like to open it up to some questions, or if you have any questions about the city or want any discussions, yeah?
First of all, great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Bolton. My question is a two-part question. So given that, given the volume, the high volume, and also frequency of information, what you were talking about in one of your slides, we want to get to the information faster, and hence, for instance, the biometric technology, and of course, technology is supporting that and is advancing greatly. So I guess my question is, how do you see the strong password requirements evolve, given, again, we're gearing toward that?
I think it's going to, my opinion, and the security people here in the room probably are not going to like this opinion, but I think eventually it is going to become mostly facial recognition in the future. The cost of resetting passwords is astronomical. Biometrics don't always work. There's security concerns. There's problems with the retina scan, and there was an issue where the second that a woman conceives, her blood vessels dilate. And the security guard would know that she was pregnant before she was, because she wouldn't be able to get through the retina eye scan. There are issues with those biometric level things. I think the facial expression, I'll give you an example. I'm recovering from I just had my hip replaced. And sitting on a couch for a while, I gained some weight. And the facial recognition on my iPhone was off. So that's going to create some issues down the line, but I think they're improving it with artificial intelligence every day. So if I pull out my Johnny Carson envelope to the head or the crystal ball, I'd have to say that I think we're going to move to either a combination of voice and face authentication in the future. Okay, what was the first part? Go ahead.
Well, it was the biometric authentication challenges, but you answered that too,
Okay.
I guess, unless you want to add something else.
No, I'm okay.
Thank you. So there are quite a few Slido questions at slido.com. So we're going to go back and forth between Slido and live questions here. So the one that has kind of percolated up is, do you recommend using password management tool?
I think that's a tough one, right? I think that's going to be up to your corporate policies and procedures. I personally use a password management tool. It works well for me. It gets difficult when you have to share that tool with other people. I think that the more that we do to move away from passwords in our industry and to move to other ways of authentication is going to be a lot easier for the industry itself. Because I think my system admins brought up something, and we're in the middle of implementing Okta right now for both two-factor authentication and for single sign-on. But at one point, we had one person that had 16 or 17 different passwords. And they were locking themselves out just trying to remember which ones that they were using. So I personally do like password management tools, but I would never want to recommend something that goes against the the corporate grain. For home, absolutely. There's too many passwords for people to remember anymore.
Are there any live questions before I next go to the Slido again? Go ahead, Richard.
What are the developing methods of measuring the effectiveness of some of the tools and training that we're trying to do in communications?
That's a tough one, right? Because I think that the challenge is that first we need to break people into enclaves of how they learn, where the preferred learning is. Then from there, we have to start measuring the effectiveness of the learning within that enclave. So up on the screen before, I put, these different channels, right? If you were to actually glue these channels together and try to measure effectiveness, you'd probably be down less than 10%. If you could separate them into channels and say, okay, we have 400 people set up for online training and 390 of them are using it, I think that's how you would measure it. because I don't think you could collaborate all that together and get any type of meaningful metrics. That's why we're having this problem. Nobody could understand how we communicate. You know, I feel like personally as a CIO, there is no other way I could communicate except I haven't tried smoke signals, but there is no other way that I know to communicate with people other than email, you know, meetings, notes, and all that kind of stuff. You know, we're going to have to start breaking people into these enclaves. Now, Ray Dalio, I don't know if anybody knows who he is. He's one of the most famous investors in the world. He was one of the first people to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually predict stocks, and he's very successful at it. He chose to record every meeting that him and his staff had. And if it was not a private meeting of executives over issues, it would go on a SharePoint portal, and anybody in the company could watch meetings that were happening in any place. He stated that his productivity of his organization went through the roof. I don't know if that would work in larger corporations, but I do know that people are trying to look at different ways to actually communicate with people. I think the more we can move to the video and maybe the podcast side of things, I think the better off we're going to be as an industry.
Next Slido question here is, what cybersecurity issues does the city of Plano deal with?
The same cybersecurity issues that you guys deal with in the corporate, but we also, many of us are seen as maybe not as sophisticated as the private sector, so we become easier targets at times. You figure I have 1.5 security people for 3,000 employees. So what we did was, I'm a CISSP. Any of my managers need to become CISSPs. And then we have a mandatory certification process that every employee at least needs to get their Security Plus. So what we try to do is deputize our IT department to become security focused, try to make up for the difference in that. But most of what we come across is malware, phishing attempts. The phishing attempts are pretty sophisticated now internally. The internal phishing attempts were, for instance, an email would be sent from, let's say, our city manager to our accounting person saying, hey, could you transfer $8 million into this account? Well, we've trained staff to say, no, that doesn't work, right? One effective thing, and very neutral on the positivity side, was that we put in all of our emails, this email originated outside the organization. And I think that people start to see, wait a minute, I didn't order anything for Amazon here at the city, or it's not coming to my city address, and they don't confuse that. We've seen our phishing attempts, so we use KnowBe4 in our environment, and we send out our own phishing campaigns to staff, and then it sends them remedial training if they fail it. So what's interesting is if we're actually seeing our phishing go down because of the external banners we're putting on there right now.
Just had a question on social engineering side. Do you agree that that's still the #1 reason that most of the attacks happen, and what can be done to kind
Sure, I mean, I think if you just include phishing into social engineering, yeah, by far, right? It's anytime that you modify somebody's perception or get them to do something that they normally wouldn't do, I consider that social engineering. But you got phishing attempts, you got malware attempts. It's not even fair. I spoke at Amazon about a year ago, and I brought up a comment that stated, there's more matches than firemen. There's a whole lot of people that could set fires, right? Very few who could do it. So teaching the organization more about phishing helps out quite a bit, but to answer your question, I would have to say by far, if you include phishing into social engineering attempts, by far it's probably one of the biggest issues.
The next question, and you know, what's going to happen is Chris will be here for some time,
Sure.
so feel free to stop by and ask. But the next question is, how did you get into this profession?
Wow. So I am not an academic. I started out in the help desk way back when and worked my way up. I took the development route. I became an Oracle PL SQL developer and an Oracle DBA for a long time. Then I went to go work for a bank, and that bank was using FoxPro to keep customer information, which really scared me, unencrypted. So I started to get interested in security. And then I moved over to another city, and I got the opportunity to get my CISSP and started as an information security manager. And it was a very, very difficult job because this was about 15 years ago. Yeah, about 15 years ago. Security was still an insurance policy. People really didn't believe in it, right? They didn't believe that people could get into their information, things of that sort. Then I went back into the CIO role, then I became a worldwide information security manager for a while because I needed to get some infrastructure experience, and that was interesting. And then I went back to the CIO route. I would have to say along the way, I think the single most important thing for any of you or anybody asking the question is that you gotta constantly learn. You gotta constantly learn. I live on Udemy. I live on Coursera. I spend a lot of time, reading information. I've learned how to develop in React and React Native. I've learned how to use Electron this year. And then I also then look at it with a critical eye on, is it make sense to do, and how much money are you saving by doing the open source side versus buying it off the shelf? But even more so, what are the security vulnerabilities that are in a lot of these different development platforms are out there? So long answer to a short question, but.
Well, Chris, thank you again for
Thank
coming
you.
out here.
It was a
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you.
And as I mentioned earlier, Chris is going to be here for a while. Please stop by, ask questions, and that's the end of the program for today. And thank you all for coming out here.